Video is to go over all of the selection tools. Um, Selecting involves taking pieces of an image and being able to either move them around the same image or make copies and put them in different layers. So unlike in Illustrator, whenever you had a new object, you could move it around and you can change its characteristics. But in Photoshop, you notice everything in here is actually part of the same plane. So they're not separate, everything's together. And if I want to be able to take something out or move it, I actually had to lift it. So we have to use the selection tools. And the selection tools are actually these selection tools. And I have a list right here. The rectangular marquee tool, the elliptical marquee tool. And so these two tools basically do something very similar. Rectangular marquee lets me select an area that's rectangular. And once I select those pixels, if I want to then lift it, I can hold on the command key, and if I click and drag, then I can move it. But notice, I lift everything I select, including those white pixels and that background. Maybe that's not the best tool for the job. You also notice that in the same tool underneath, there's also the elliptical marquee tool. And this one would probably be ideal to do something like a circle, because you can do circular selections. You notice? I would click and I drag and I can make a selection and I can move it holding the space bar, and once I've got something I can hold on the command key and I can move my selection. So that one would probably work better for circles. Now if I have something complicated, I get to my lasso tool, and so the lasso tool lets you select irregular areas. Here's my lasso tool. It looks like a little lasso, and you notice a little demo there. You would just drag around the area you want to select, and when you're done you get that little marching ants. So for example, this is an irregular area, so if I click and I basically outline what I want, I would have to go slowly and patiently. And if you go too fast, the problem with this tool is you might overshoot something. And look, there's a mistake right there, right? I'm either taking too much out or grabbing something I don't want. So this tool will work great, but you have to be very slow and patient. You cannot rush it. And once I'm back at the beginning, I can close in the selection, and so then I can move it. But it does have those little disadvantages. So there must be a better tool for this kind of job. Let's have a look at the polygon lasso tool. This one actually lets me select, but only by clicking areas. So as a matter of fact, in here there's probably not a lot that's straight, so if I wanted, maybe I could do this. I can click here, click here, click here, click here, and do that kind of selection. See how they're all straight? So the polygon selection tool would let me select something by just clicking, kind of like the pen tool in Illustrator, if you remember that. Almost there. We have the magic wand. The magic wand lets you select similar color areas. So for example, most of this is yellow. If I use the magic wand, it finds most of the similar colors. These are lighter yellows and these are darker yellows, and so it highlights a pretty good chunk. Here, for example, most of these are like orange, red. This is mostly white, and so it selects that. And so it's pretty good at finding one color to similar colors. If I click the background, it selects all of the background. See? But there's even one more tool that you can use, and that would be the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool works like a brush. If you use the brackets, you can make the brush smaller or bigger, and if you click over an area, sometimes it's smart enough to know exactly what you want. Other times you might have to keep clicking and add a selection, and other times it might overshoot and select things you don't want. In that case, you use the shift to add and option to subtract. So see how I overshot it. If I hold on the option key and I click, it takes away from the selection, and that leaves me the better selection. Now if I make the brush smaller, sometimes it's even more accurate. Option click and it deselects. Shift click and it adds. And so this is how I would go about doing this selection. And perhaps maybe getting back to the lasso again, and then again, if I do shift, I can add to my selection. If I do option, I can subtract, and maybe I can actually fix these a little. If I zoom in, so I can see the areas that I don't want. Option to subtract, and Shift to add. Option to subtract, Shift to add. The point is not to deselect. When you're done selecting something, if you moved it and you're happy, you could also deselect by going to the select menu and going to deselect, or Command D, and that would let you do that. And I think that about covers all of the selection tools. If you want to then move something, like for example, if I want to select the bow tie and then I want to move the bow tie, I would hold the Command key, and once I put it where I want, maybe I want that bow tie to be smaller or bigger, I can do the transform command. That would be Command T, free transform, and what this lets me do is it lets me resize something or make it smaller. But you have to be careful not to do something bigger than the resolution allows, otherwise you're going to have those pixelated looking images. And when I'm done, I do Command D for deselect, and then I have a selection. So the goal of this project is for you guys to make a melon head, like a Mr. Potato Head. Take all these images out of their background, select them correctly, not too much white background, actually hardly any, and the better you do it, the more points. And so I wish you guys do a good job with this.